This is the Veterinary Project Podcast, episode 32, part 1.
Welcome to the show created by vets featuring absolutely no pets. This is the Veterinary Project Podcast, hosted by Dr. Michael Bugg and Dr. Jonathan Light. Our resident veterinarians have swapped out their stethoscopes in favor of microphones to bring you the Veterinary Project Podcast, a show focused on real conversations, aimed to connect this amazing profession full of remarkable people. Through the sharing of collective stories and wisdom, and connecting over the many unique challenges we face, we invite you to join our community of veterinary professionals leading intentional lives. And now, here are the hosts of the Veterinary Project Podcast, Dr. Michael Bugg and Dr. Jonathan Light.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Veterinary Project Podcast. As always, you have your co-host, Dr. Michael Bugg, Dr. Jonathan Light. And Jonathan, we are recording this in early March. We have almost a whole month of episodes in the can, pre-recorded, ready to roll out. How does that feel?
It feels amazing. And I think I look back at this and, we were speaking about this in December on some strategy calls that we had. We had to step this up to the next level. There's a lot of things going on in our own lives in terms of projects. And look at it. We brought on new team members and we're making a go of this, and we're doing a great light with a enlarged audience that we want to have a really true effect with, but we have limitations. So to have a month's worth of episodes in the bag feels great.
Yeah. And it's almost like a microcosm of, working in the veterinary industry where we recognized, what we were doing was not going to be sustainable. Trying to put out a weekly episode, the way we were doing it, the way our back end was set up, we were running as hard as we could just to stay ahead 1 week. Right. And so it's a really important reminder, no matter what you're doing, if you recognize that it is unsustainable, make some changes, let some stuff go, bring new things on.
And also not be afraid to say it as well too, right? You and I had a couple of not hard conversations, but uncomfortable conversations to be able to break through and look at where we are now. Again, and we're nowhere near where we want to be, but we're a lot farther.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's really interesting for me, from my perspective, is it feels lighter, like it's taking up less of my energy now, less of my time, and we're getting more done. It's kind of shocking.
Look at that.
Yeah.
We're growing up.
We are. Okay, before we dive into this episode and the bio for this week's guest, we got to throw it over to you for our quick tip.
My quick tip this week, it's a good one, and I like it. And I follow a gentleman named Seth Godin that talks about the evolution of the education system and how it is being turned upside on its head. And this weekend's a perfect example. I had some financial learning I needed to do. I jumped onto YouTube. Libraries are closed here right now because of COVID, but I wanted something credible. So I jumped onto YouTube. I was looking up Harvard, looking up MIT, and there's all this MIT open courseware, jumped me right to where I needed to be in terms of this financial piece I was looking at. And within the half hour, I had a credible source of knowledge that I'm going to go back to and back to again. Never would have been able to go and get that in the past. And so whether it's been renovations or education pieces, don't be afraid to look outside what's been the norm. And many people are doing this already, and this just was proven true to me again this weekend. I'd never been onto that. I now have subscribed to them and looking forward to seeing what else I learn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's truly amazing what you can learn with an internet connection and a computer. I think is Corsica another one of those high-level ones.
Corsica, Udemy, there's so many different versions now.
Yeah, and they have high-level, highly credible instructors on some of these courses.
Fully and free. And or on like Udemy or Corsica, you're paying $20 for something that would have cost you at least $300 to $500 Canadian before, plus the textbook, which would have sat on your shelf for the rest of its life. Unbelievable what you can do.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I mean, certainly something like veterinary medicine, hands-on, in the lab, you can't replace that over a computer. But for a large chunk of traditional education, it's going to be very interesting what 10 years from now looks like.
Correct.
Yep. Okay, diving in, this is a two-part episode similar to what we did with Devin. So we have with us Dr. Enid Stiles, and we're going to be releasing this over the course of 2 weeks. In this first part, we kind of dive into more of Enid's personal life, some of her passions. She runs a veterinary clinic. And then in part 2, we dive more into her role in the CVMA and talk a little bit about what it means to be on council. So Dr. Enid Stiles graduated with a DVM from the Ontario Veterinary College in 2000. Prior to her veterinary degree, she completed a Bachelor of Science in Conservation Biology at the University of Ottawa. And in 2009, she completed a Master's in Clinical Sciences in Behaviour Medicine at the Faculty of Veterinary Medicine at the University of Montreal. International veterinary medicine is a passion of Enids. As a founding member of Veterinarians Without Border Canada and past president, Enid has been fortunate to work with people and animals around the world. And you will see this come up immediately when we get talking to her, the passion of travel and working internationally. She believes strongly in working for and with communities in need to foster the health of animals, people, and the environments that sustain us all. Enid works closely with Montreal-based cat and dog rescue groups, as well as her continued work with Vets Without Border and the CVMA on improving veterinary services for remote and underserved communities in Canada. In 2009, Enid opened her own small animal practice in the West Island of Montreal, Sherwood Park Animal Hospital. It has grown rapidly and has a newly developed mobile service for palliative and home euthanasia called Compassion Vet Montreal. In recent years, Enid has become a regular presence in print, television, radio, and social media, advocating on current national and international animal health issues. In 2015, Enid was selected as a member of the CVMA National Issues Committee and soon went on to be on council representative for Quebec, and she is now the current president of the CVMA. Without any further ado, I give you Dr. Enid Stiles. All right, Enid, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. It's great to have you on the podcast.
Thanks. Great being here.
Yeah. So I know we have you for a while here. We're going to be doing this in a two-part episode. The latter half, we're going to dive into a lot of CVMA stuff. But I did want to touch on, as we introduce you, your very first president's message as a CVMA president. So you said something in there that was really important. I guess it was a promise to kind of all Canadian veterinarians. And I would even go so far as it was like an oath or a vow. And in that September issue, you promised that on every Zoom call, you would be wearing pants. So
yes.
I want to make sure we're extending that same courtesy to our international guest today, and that you are in fact wearing pants.
I am in fact wearing leggings. I don't know if they count, but I am wearing pants and fluffy socks. Fluffy socks, never without now.
Okay.
Always wear fluffy socks. Actually, I will tell you something funny, that I'm a bit of a shoe person. I love shoes. And when I first went on to council with CVMA, and the first time that Louis Qantas, Dr. Qantas, who is our Alberta council member and soon to be president, was obsessed with my shoes because I often wore pointy shoes too. So now we have a running joke when we're on our meetings together that we show each other what we're wearing on our feet, and it tends to be slippers and socks. And all of my pointy shoes now have a lot of dust. It's very, very sad for me. Very sad. So that's my story.
And has Louis bought some pointy shoes to match up with your pointy shoes? Because if so, then I'm on to this.
He has fancy shoes that I saw him wearing last time, and he made a note to show me. So maybe not quite the really pointy.
No stilettos at this point.
No stilettos for him. I might get him in that yet, but yeah.
We had time.
It is funny how everyone has a fantastic upper half of their wardrobe during COVID, and then sweatpants, pajama pants, whatever on the bottom. So,
yep.
All right, Enid. So I guess for our guests listening, you have a really interesting path to your current position. Why don't you kind of introduce yourself and fill us in on how you got to where you are?
Sure. It's a bit long, so I'll try and get through it quickly. So I'm actually originally a Newfoundlander. So I'm from St. John's, Newfoundland. Although my parents are American and they were those hippies that moved to Canada during a certain particular political period and happened to be university professor and anthropologist and all that kind of fun stuff. So there was a lot of interesting parties at our house and more than just pipes being smoked, regular tobacco and all that kind of stuff. So I do have a kind of granola background in St. John's, Newfoundland. And then, oh, there's my dog. And then my father, being an anthropologist, started getting involved in energy conservation, and we ended up getting a project. Well, he ended up getting a project in Zimbabwe. So when I was 14, I moved to Zimbabwe in Africa, which is the southern part of Africa. And my parents actually lived out there for 23 years in the region. And I stayed there for quite a few years as well, going to school. Oh my gosh, my dog is really barking. She never does that. So she's going to do that today.
It's the perfect time.
So I know. So anyhow, so I moved out to Zimbabwe and did some high school there, moved back to Canada, went to boarding school, but it opened my eyes to some amazing things in the world, and wildlife became an absolute obsession. So every summer, every winter holiday, I was back in Africa with my parents. And then I went to University of Ottawa, did an undergrad wildlife biology. Then I went to, University of McGill, sort of as a part-time student doing quite a bit of interesting stuff, started a master's, got into OVC, hallelujah. So I went to OVC, graduated 2000, still thinking I was going to go into wildlife, but in my final year, I realized really I absolutely loved small animal medicine.
Yes.
Came back to Montreal, and since then I've been practicing here and opened up my own business 9 years ago in small animal medicine. My interests in the other side of the world of veterinary medicine have been that I'm started when I was in vet school, something called Global Vets with one of my good friends, Michelle Cutler. Okay. And that's still going crazy. So it was an opportunity for students to get experience abroad and see veterinary medicine internationally. And we went to India in 1998. And then a few years after I graduated, Taves, who is a population medicine specialist epidemiologist at OVC, and he was a real supporter of Global Vets. And I just love him. He has a very, at the time it was eco-health, now it's more One Health we talk about, but really amazing person. And kind of just gave me a call, and a few other people across Canada, Aaron Fraser at the time as well, and said, hey, like, do we have Vets Without Borders in Canada? And we said, no. And he said, would you like to get one going? And we were like, yes. And that was pretty much what happened. It in part happened because we had been approached by Aeroplan, so that's the Air Miles through Air Canada Beyond Miles program, and they were looking for a veterinary sort of Beyond Miles program to support. And that was how it started. We kind of fell upon this interesting opportunity and then got rolling. So yeah, I was on the board and then president for a few years. It was really a fantastic opportunity. I cannot say more about what a wonderful organization Vets Without Borders Canada is. And it's still going strong. And then after my 10 years, you know what, 10 years on a board, like long, I feel it's time for new faces, new blood to come on. So I gently came off, and within about 2 months, my husband was laughing because I said, I'm going to take a break from stuff, honey. Within 2 months, I was called to be asked if I could be on the National Issues Committee, if I would be interested, which is a committee on the CVMA. And that was my beginning of CVMA. And I just absolutely love CVMA too. And I kind of, within a few years, I became a council member for representative for Quebec. And then with a few years of being there, was asked to be on executive. So I've been on the council and executive now for 7 years. And now I'm president. And that's my journey.
Can I jump into that for real quick, Mike? Do you mind?
Yeah, go wherever. Yeah.
So there's a lot of people that think about jumping onto a committee or want to jump onto a committee. It seems like you were drawn to it, whether it was people that had recognized certain traits in you and or your volunteerism and experience. Why? why the CVMA? Why jump into it? It's a big deal out there for especially veterinarians in our busy lives.
Yeah.
Why take that step?
You know, I mean, as like when you were listening to some of the things about my history, starting Global Vets, when I was in university, like in undergrad, I was part of the Environmental Youth Action. I was then always, when I was at OVC, I was the, what they call external affairs representative. So I was like on student council there. I was the SCVMA representative. So I kind of knew CVMA. Yep. So I think part of the answer to your question is that it comes from within. Yep. You know, people who want to get involved will get involved. They will find ways to get involved with as small or as big an organization as they feel comfortable with, whether that's their community, you know, soup kitchen, or whether it's the rescue that you work with at your clinic. It's going to be whatever draws you. The CVMA for me was really an interesting place to go because I knew that I thought I could offer a lot more when it comes to things like engaging our Canadian veterinarians on areas that are very important to us as a profession. And I thought I could better reach those people and better engage myself into those issues if I was working with CVMA. Okay. So that's why I went with CVMA.
Excellent. Thank you.
Nice. Okay, well, we're going to spend a lot of time diving into that. I want to rewind and kind of go all the way back to the start. Before I dive into some of the small animal stuff, I just have to ask you, because I'm curious, wildlife, like what was some of your favorite wildlife to work with? Because I don't think we've had any wildlife like vets on yet.
Nope.
Yeah. Well, when obviously in Newfoundland, the biggest wildlife I got to see was moose, which were big, of course, but I'm usually in front of our vehicle or walking down our laneway. So not too much hands-on with wildlife in Newfoundland. But when I went to Africa, obviously it became very different. And in fact, I saw a whole part of wildlife that I never really appreciated, which was the side of the hunters associations wanting to be very involved in wildlife conservation. And so, in fact, my mother became involved with a wildlife camp for children from across the country, from students. So the schools would send their students to this wildlife camp in this conservation area where the hunters would then teach them about wildlife and teach them about the importance of conservation and how important it is, strangely for them, because they want to be able to have enough to hunt, but their appreciation for nature and the conservation needs was palpable and extremely important. And so we got very involved in this. And so we would go out into these camps and there would be a teaching opportunity. So there would be lots of walks and things where we would go out to see the wildlife, everything from elephants, on foot to hippos on canoe, when you're in your canoes, being careful about the hippos coming after you, to incredible bird life. And then being into sciences, I was always really excited about the fact that they would always teach the schools about anatomy. And so the hunters would go and they would take a small group of students and they would hunt one of the, usually an old buck or a not so important impala within a group. And so the impala is like a small deer. And then they would take all of that meat, but before we would do so, we would have a whole anatomy lesson and we'd string it up and teach them all about that. And so that was like my first introduction to African wildlife science. I was, in my early teens, late teens, finding out all about that. And then I got to know some more of the hunters. I did some projects when I was in university on vultures. And then I got involved and did my final year of undergrad research project on toxicology, because they use a fairly nasty type of toxin to kill these birds they call quelea, which come in millions and decimate wheat fields in Zimbabwe. And so, but they also kill non-target birds. So I got very interested in that. So there was quite a bit of ornithology that I did in my few years. When I got into vet school, every opportunity I could have to talk about wildlife, I did anatomy on hyena and their differences in their sexual organs, which are very odd if you didn't know. I tried to, again, reach out more every time I had a chance to go back to Africa, working with vets in the field. Did some wildlife in some of the wildlife parks, tagged some cheetah, moved leopard, like some really fun stuff, really super fun. So I'm sure you want to know why I didn't keep doing it.
Man, I'm just like blown away by the experience. Like you've had like 3 lifetimes of experience, it seems like.
Yeah, it's so fun. And I think that probably, I was actually thinking about this with my daughter the other day, because she asked me, Mommy, do you have any regrets about anything that you've done in your, like being like what you're doing now? Do you regret it? Do you, And I said, no, I don't regret it at all. Did I think I would be in small animal practice at this point in the suburb of Montreal? No, definitely not. That was not in the cards. Like, I'm moving back to Africa. I'm going to be a wildlife vet out there. And I think that the challenge seemed a bit bigger than I thought it possible. And I knew that the route to do that wasn't really going to be an interesting route for me. A lot of times you end up having to do pathology, right? That tends to be the field, or you're working within zoo animals, which I did a good stage in zoo animal medicine, 2 stages of placement. Sorry, I speak French sometimes. In my final year, like I'm still super keen on that area, but the idea of it being my only area meant I had to drop everything else. And I don't think at that time when I was graduating from vet school, that's what I wanted to do, because I very quickly realized that what I love the most about being a vet is I love the relationships with people. Mm-hmm. And unless I wanted to go into exotic animal medicine, I was not going to get that very closely with working with wildlife, whether it be in zoo animal or whether it be in wildlife somewhere else, working for government, et cetera. It was going to be probably a lot of wildlife pathology, a lot of exotic animal diseases, epidemiology, that kind of thing. And it just really wasn't where my heart was at the time.
Can you tell us a little more about that? Because often when I'm talking with a veterinarian or someone who's aspiring to be a veterinarian, you'll hear them say, I really love animals. I really love pets. And you just said it's the relationship with people that you fell in love with. So I'd love to dive into that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you guys are both vets, so you know this, and it comes with its the good and the bad, right? Obviously, I think that I do absolutely love the animals that I work with. But I know that when I finally one day retire, I don't think I'm going to be missing seeing all these pets. I mean, I like them, but I'm not going to miss them like I'm going to miss talking to, Mrs. Brown about her family and where her kids are at and how important her dog is to her right now because she's going through something very difficult. I really think that those things that I'm going to remember, it's going to be those moments with people that I feel that we can have a very good impact on their lives. And maybe that sounds kind of selfish of me to think that way, but it's the reality of how I feel. I love the animals, but it's truly 100% the relationships that I build with people that keep me going.
Mm-hmm. Can I jump in very quickly with that? Enid, was it the experiences that you had in undergrad and in vet school that set you up for that awareness? It sounds like you had that self-awareness very early in your career, because I think there are a number of individuals now that come out of vet school with one notion of what veterinary medicine is going to be, and it's a real big wall and a train that hits them within the first 3 years of veterinary medicine to the exact opposite.
Yeah, absolutely. It absolutely was things that happened or that I experienced before and during vet school. So like when I was in Africa, I actually went and spent a lot of time, what they call stinging practice, in some of the small animal practices that were nearby to where we were living. And it was a little bit James Harriet-y because they don't have a lot there, right? Like there were no ultrasounds and fancy equipment. I mean, I remember they did a surgery once, crazy stuff that I think about. where, there's no ventilators or anything. There's no hospitals with a ventilator. So it's not like they could do this. And there was a diaphragmatic hernia in a puppy. And the vet that I was with, he's like, okay, we're going to try and fix this. And the dog went under injectable anesthesia, and the assistant, I'm not joking when I tell you this, with the tube down the throat, this is how we were giving the dog oxygen. And while he was busy fixing, so there's, ventilator, also known as person blowing in mouth, not even a bag, his exhaled CO2. Anyhow, he saved that puppy, and I went, oh my God, like that's crazy. The resilience of animals, but these types of crazy experiences, these James Herriot moments definitely made me very aware of what it was that these vets that I was working with, they had so little to work with, and they just did everything they could, and they did everything they could for those people that were out there. They wanted to save the animal, but for sure it was that old lady down the street and her little Jack Russell who needed help that day, and that's what it was. Totally.
Excellent.
Yeah.
That's amazing perspective too, when we come back to North America, to Canada, and now you have access to far more equipment, at your disposal, when you hear something like that.
And I feel bad for the students that come out now, because I do feel that many of them haven't experienced possibly what that reality is in practice. And I don't know how to change that. Some of the colleges don't even have required placements. That's really unfortunate, because I really, really think that if all you're getting to learn from veterinary medicine is what they teach you at school, no, not going to happen. Not the place. Yep. And yeah, I at OVC, we had a required placement, right? With OMAFRA, it was like a partially funded program. So you have to spend 8 weeks out. So I had to go to a rural practice and do small and large, but it could have been just all large if I wanted. And thank goodness for that, or I would never have had any idea about what dairy practice is like in Canada if I hadn't done that. Mm-hmm. Amazing.
Isn't that something? And I think, we're speaking to a major crux in our system right now, and I don't foresee it getting better anytime soon. And I put on the spot because we're only learning gold standard medicine, so to say, in veterinary colleges, and not providing for what sometimes is a drastic difference in reality once you come out, depending on where you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've talked about that a lot with CVMA.
Stress.
In fact, we even had some really good speakers on sort of the gold standard and what that means for us.
Yep.
Wow. It's we talk about wellness. I think about the vets that have worked with me, and the ones that struggled the most are the ones that just cannot move from gold standard. They don't understand that gold standard is just a perspective. It's not what's real. And there's so much between, and there's so much that we can do. And sometimes we can't do it all. And that is something we have to sadly understand and be comfortable with. That's just the way it is, Yeah.
And that stress of that in between for an individual that's only a year out, that goes, I can't live in this area here because I don't have enough experience, which again is not, in my view, again, I put myself out there, that's not their fault. That's our fault in our teaching to what or that exposure, just like you had in your experiences out and abroad.
Yeah, and I think to that aspect, and I know that a lot of practices try really hard to have good mentorship, but I mean, it is so important to have good mentors around you. And that those mentors, everybody wants to work in the big, fancy, fast-paced hospital where, there's, MRI and there's this and that, but they're not going to learn, if ever they want to work in a smaller practice, what it's really like. Being with mentors, when I graduated, I actually was in a pretty big hospital, but there were 4 men owners and 1 woman owner when I graduated, and all the 4 of the men had the most entirely different way of practicing you could ever see. They were all so different, and I started to know who to go to for whatever question, but they were always there to answer. They were open arms. They had time for me. That was golden opportunity. Golden.
Mike, can I ask one more question then? Sorry, and I'm jumping in here, but I don't want to miss this while I can. Enid, what does mentorship mean to you? Like, what do you look at as what is mentorship?
My husband and I, because he's the practice owner, which we'll talk about with me, he's a psychologist. And, when we see people that come and go through our practice, so leaving for next stages in their lives, following girlfriends, whatever they're doing, the only thing that we can live with at the end of the day, and when we finally, at some point, sell our practice and retire, is what have we helped those people with in their journey? And I hope that that can be mentorship in whatever way we can offer it. So if that is mentoring them into that it's important to have a decent work-life balance and ensuring that they have that, that's probably my goal thing that I can give them. And then to help them, I often say to some of the new grads that work with me, just come. I mean, it sounds really, again, like egocentric that I'm saying this, but just come and listen to this conversation I'm about to have with this client. Just sit next to me. They may not hear what the other person's saying, but they can hear the words that I'm saying to that person. So they can't always be in room with me. And when they do that, it's incredible what they hear, because they don't realize sometimes just a choice of words that you might be using. Helping them with surgeries, they come out with zero surgical experience, but it's very hard as an owner to find time to mentor, and especially now with our workforce shortage. So for me, it's about just giving them key things so that they can make better decisions themselves, and to show them that it isn't just all a gold standard. There's a lot of in between, and they need to be comfortable with that. But that's to guide them. That's all.
Excellent.
And I really like how you put that gold standard is just a perspective. And I think for a lot of people where frustration arises is that gap in expectation and reality, right? So like you guys have said, you come out expecting, okay, gold standard is what we need. And then reality is just completely different, so I think it sets it up for failure that way and frustration.
Yeah.
Enid, one area kind of continuing deeper into the relationship conversation, I have read a lot of your articles, and a lot of them dive into euthanasia. And I know there's no curveball to this one, but in another one of your president's messages, you said, "I consider my time on this earth as a veterinarian a privilege." And then it spoke a lot about in euthanasia and taking a moment, right? Being busy. I mean, we are really busy right now. But in that article, you said, take some time to pause and take in this moment. Can we dive into euthanasia a little bit and how you connect those relationships with those owners?
Yeah. Well, it's something they don't teach at vet school either. I think they're starting to, but we're still very far off of euthanasia training. And I will say that it is the most incredible gift you can give anybody in this life, to help them as a vet, that is to help them in those moments and be there for them. And having that be a genuine experience for you and for them, whatever that might be, is key. And in fact, it's key to wellness. We talk a lot about burnout. We talk a lot about compassion fatigue. And I know that there is a portion, not necessarily entirely, but there's certainly a portion that is related to the sheer number of euthanasias, that toll that takes on us. So early on, when I was in my undergrad, when I was in vet school, we started learning a little bit about communication. It was like because it was 20 years ago I graduated. We started having some classes on that, and it was really engaging and interesting. And then, of course, being there for the euthanasias, and then when I graduated, being the one to do the euthanasias, and then having some of these experiences people may have told you, but they're called dysthanasias. So it's when the euthanasia goes bad. And you just have a few of those to want to throw in the towel and leave the profession, okay? There's nothing worse than it not going well. And when you have inexperience, it's going to happen. And even when you have experience, it's going to happen sometimes. So I quickly realized that for me, I wanted to have that happen as least frequently as possible. So I started to train myself into improved ways to euthanize. And I also realized that some of the things that I thought we were doing in some of the practices that I worked at was really maybe not so personal and very cold, on the table and letting people walk out the front door without walking with them, and stuff that just seemed wrong in that moment. That's really, for that person, really important, the most important thing. So yeah, I started doing some training. We took a course. There's an interesting organization called the Companion Animal Euthanasia Training, CAET, and it's they give courses, and it's amazing. So we did that for our whole team. And now we do actually have a whole program called Compassion Vet Montreal, which is for home euthanasias and palliative care. So I've taken it another step. Like, this was something I realized we don't learn very much in school. I want to learn how to do it really, really well, because I very quickly learned that this is extremely hard on you. Yeah. When I'm really not in a good place mentally, like if I'm really tired and exhausted and I've been working too much and all of that, the first thing that I start to see in myself, and it's like my red flag, this is where I've got to take a step back, is if I'm not emotionally present in my euthanasia. If I have checked out before I walked in that door and I'm not even feeling it, even in the slightest, then for me, that's me. I know I'm out. I got to take a break. I am not feeling anymore. And that's a personal insight to me on knowing when I'm not having a very good time.
Yeah, that's amazing insight. What does that mean? So you said take a break. Does that mean literally just step away for an amount of time, or are there things that you do to kind of recover?
I think I've identified in the years sort of some of these checklists that I have of my own wellness, and knowing when I'm in that box that's, oh God, what that usually means for me is that I need to slow down. So it's more of a broad thing. I may need to try and find a way to take a few days off, try and reduce my workload a little bit. I used to be able to travel. I'm doing so much anymore. Mm-hmm. So yeah, for me, that it's all of a sudden I'm fairly emotionally available for my clients, or at least I feel like I am, or my ability to absorb their emotions and deal with them in the moment has allowed me to be the vet that I am. For others, it's very different. They don't want to react in the moment. They shut it out, but they leave the door and out it comes. And that's fine. Everybody's different. Absolutely. Just my own personal way is being there in the moment. It's very important. And so when I'm not, I know emotionally I am not in a good place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's important what you said, honoring what your process is. It's not right or wrong. It's what works for you, and honoring it. You said, when you're getting overwhelmed or noticing those check boxes go off, the solution isn't just do twice as much of that and power through it and pound more on top. It's to honor it and step away.
Yeah. I don't know if you read that one. I call it my Swiss Army knife. I reach for my Swiss Army knife.
Yeah.
So it's and this is so ridiculous. It might be my Swiss Army knife might be doing 20 castrations in a row. That just brings me down. I'm like, okay, that's what I needed to do. Everything needed to be reliable. I needed to done. Thank you. Excellent. Cool. Or it might be, taking a few days and just doing a ton of laundry and going to the gym. That might help me. Mm-hmm. So my Swiss Army knife that I know is reliable, that I can go to all the time, that is the way that I cope. The problem is with the Swiss Army knife is that COVID's kind of made it a bit blunt, not working so well, because so much of it is I'm not able to get to those things that I had, those checklist box things. My coping mechanisms are not as present, like the traveling part or going to the gym with people. Now I got to just work out in my basement by myself.
Yeah. See, and so, sort of to run with your analogy, the great thing about a Swiss Army knife is there's so many tools on it, right? It's not just one option. So yes, travel is shut down. Yes, going to the gym in a group is shut down, but you have other options to lean on. The other thing, can you tell the story of the Swiss Army knife? Because for you, it's not just a Swiss Army knife. Like there's an emotional connection, which I think is important for people, because our listeners don't need to use the example of a Swiss Army knife. It has to be something that speaks to them.
Yeah. So the story behind the Swiss Army knife is that, I mean, when I was growing up, like that was the thing to have. And when I went to Africa, everybody had to have a Swiss Army knife. You always had, it was always something you could use. You needed to open up a bottle. You needed to cut this thing off, whatever. Of course, now we can't travel with them as easily, but in my day, things were easier. So we were out, I was talking about this camp that my mom was part of, and my dad would come out too. We would go out to this conservation camp. And one day when we were out on one of our nature walks with the hunters, we found a dead elephant, a young bull who was up just along the Zambezi River, like half in the water. And in Zimbabwe, of course, culling was huge. They were culling in order to reduce the numbers of the elephants, but it was really because there was so much poaching going on in certain areas. So these poachers would be coming into private land, to government land, and killing elephants for the ivory. Still happening today. And so this bull had died obviously of natural causes because his tusks were still there. And we needed to get those tusks out and fast. And no one had anything except my dad had his Swiss Army knife. And it cut through that elephant skin, which is incredible to me.
Yeah.
I still can't believe that. Cut through that elephant skin, and we managed to save that the ivory from going into the wrong hands. So it represents that, like my father always being that person that I could rely on, and then this object, which was like not going to fail me. It was not going to fail, and it didn't fail that day. And I don't know that it ever will fail me. In the like in the idea of what that represents to me, that Swiss Army knife is what I can always go to.
That's amazing. The piece that it will never fail you. I love that.
And that there's emotional attachment to your dad too. In that present moment, you're always going to think back to that. So therefore you've got both aspects all wrapped together so nicely.
Yeah. I love that.
At the moment.
Okay. Well, let's keep diving in. In your business, your small animal clinic, as you mentioned, you started kind of a branch of it, this at-home euthanasia, palliative care. And I thought it was very interesting how this developed as a passion. You saw the need, you saw the gap. Hey, euthanasia is not being done well. You love it, like in the sense of the connection with the client. So you brought it and turned that into an avenue of your business. So let's dive in there and talk about, running a vet clinic during COVID. What does that look like? Like, how have you adapted? How have you pivoted?
Yeah. I'm laughing.
Yeah.
Where to start?
If you'd asked me 2 years ago that this is what I was going to be doing, oh my Lord, never. I mean, owning a practice is, it's hard work. Like, it's really hard work. And I love it, obviously, because if I didn't, just between you, me, and all the people that are watching this, I could have sold very quickly given the market, just saying. So I love it. And my husband is our practice manager and co-owner with me, and he's a psychologist. So this brings on a whole thing. But throughout ownership, I think you realize more and more what you do and do not like to do in business, and what you're good at. And some things you have to get really good at, even if you can't stand doing them, like human resources. I just did like 25, yearly reviews. Yep. Oh my gosh.
Mind numbing.
Oh, anyway. Out there who are business managers and owners of practices who love that kind of stuff. I mean, they're like, give me more geez, make me write more things. I'm just like, I just want to be a vet, and I just want my team to like me. Not hate me. So it's challenging, and COVID has made it, super challenging, super challenging. Yeah. More than one way.
You had said, when COVID hit, you stopped taking clients around December because you said you would lose people, like you would lose staff members if you didn't do that.
Yeah. So, I talk to a lot of practice owners. I see a lot of them on all sorts of social media groups, with other owners, and other vets. And for sure, given our major and significant, which we can talk about at some point, shortage of veterinarians and animal health technicians. I mean, our veterinary technologists, we're in as equal problem there. We just don't have the staffing. And being so backlogged, like all of a sudden for 2 or 3 months, many of us in Canada had to stop seeing basic annual exams. And all we could see was the things that were most urgent. Couldn't do sterilizations. And, we were growing at a moderate pace, something we felt was doable, kind of had an idea, my husband and I, how big we want to get and how we were going to do this with time. But those few months that we had to stop seeing things at that level and cut back put us so behind on everything. You don't really realize how behind you are until you're that behind. Then we were playing catch up, and still are. We're still playing catch up. We still are seeing people today that should have been seen this time last year. Crazy. So all of this catch up, and then all of these people getting new puppies and kittens. I mean, it has been across everywhere. I mean, I have a colleague in Norway. She's on the TV all the time now talking about this. Like, it's everywhere. Everybody's trying to get puppies and kittens. So huge increase in our pet population, and no vet has time to see them. And we were seeing some. And then I finally realized that our staff, finally, it was not really a finally, it was pretty obvious that our staff was really running out of fuel, and we were going to start to have to see some big changes. So to help them, we decided for about a month and a half, we would stop taking any new patients whatsoever. We're back to taking puppies and kittens and new adoptions just in our local area. So just in the communities around us. But, people are calling us from 30 kilometers away because they can't get a vet, and we have to turn them away. Insane. It's crazy. Yeah. Yeah.
So many places to go with that conversation in terms of through the evolution up till December, touching on that and as brief as possible for what that looked like from your staff standpoint. Was that a conversation that you were continually having with your staff? Was that just the elevated stress levels you were seeing with your staff? Was it the pushback that you were receiving from your clients? What did that look like specifically?
I would say a combination of all three of those things. I fired only a couple clients in my entire 11 years of having a practice, officially fired, told them to go elsewhere. And since COVID, we fired 3, and I'm just in the midst of firing another. Like, people can be awful when they're stressed out, right? So we've had, and some people are extremely understanding about what's going on and understand that there's waiting times and understand they just might not get anybody to answer the phone. We've changed our phone system. We've got text now. We're doing, our hours are different. Like, it's insane. Just trying to reach our own clients. But when it comes to the staff, I would say that's what's the most hurtful. It's the most difficult to see that every single one of them is stressed. They don't even want to talk about things when they go home anymore. We used to have people kind of have fun about talking about things. Now they just want to leave and just want to tune it all out because it's so intense. And we try to find ways to help them, and ensuring that they're trying not to go overtime because we know they're going to burn out, and trying to give everybody as much time off as possible. And we've taken a few days, for a little while, we closed on Friday evenings because we still usually are open Friday night, but we closed down Friday nights. We took extra time off and closed the clinic over Christmas longer than usual. Like just little things that you have to do to just try and keep them okay.
Yep.
But along the way, we've lost a few people, and I can't blame them. They're not going to other clinics. They're just moving into different careers, taking different paths.
And that's part of that journey and mentorship and walking them through as best as possible, and yet trying not to feel like a failure when they are going different ways. That's tough.
Yeah. My husband always asks me why I take it so personally when people leave. He's like, they're just going to their next journey, honey. It's good for them. And I'm like, why can't they stay with me? What do they do? Anyway.
It's interesting hearing how you've navigated this. As the business owner and running a business, some of these decisions are obviously not made to improve the bottom line, right? Closing for extra days, closing Friday evening. Can you touch on that? Because you have your staff, you have these relationships, right? And then you have a business that needs to produce profit. And, sometimes those pull at each other.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think that certainly there are many owners out there and business people who would think that what we've been doing is crazy. But I don't think we have a choice. This is our family. I mean, our practice is our family. Well, first of all, we wouldn't have a life to live and a practice to have if it weren't for them. Working through these difficult times has demonstrated how important being a strong team is, because without them and their efforts together, all of us, we wouldn't have gone through as long as we did. Even with all the horrible ups and downs that have happened, it still wouldn't have happened without them. So when we talk about profits, having just gone through our reviews and just did our yearly, our year end, we were scared because for 2 or 3 months, we laid a few people sort of partially off with the government program. We cut down our hours. It was like, in the middle of the busiest season of the year, we just went like this. And then, like I was saying, all that stuff happened. Then we started hiring and hiring and hiring. So now we've hired. So normally we have about 1,900 to 1,950 hours every 2 weeks that are being built, that are in our for
charged out
for hours worked. Yeah. And not counting myself and my husband, but that's the number. And that, so if you look at last year so comparatively a year ago, we are now up to 2,200 hours. So we've increased the number of hours worked by about 20%. And that's by hiring people mostly, but 20%, like that's insane in 1 year. And I'm trying to hire more because I have a new vet starting. So I got to hire at least 3 more people. So when you look at the profits, you think, oh my God, like having an increase in profit by 20% is a really good increase if you're a stable practice. Okay, that's like really good. And we didn't quite have that, but we weren't that far off. Yep. So what it means is that our gross, I should say, not of our profit, but of our gross has increased that much just because of like people paying for more tests, more puppies. I don't know. We don't seem more efficient. We are very much inefficient, but we're the sheer door. Yep. They call them door swings. I guess, even though they can't come in, the actual door swings have increased. And so, and we've increased our costs. Like we did all sorts of things because we're like, well, we need more of this, we need more of that. We'll increase the fees that we have. Our service fees are a little bit more, but not like crazy. And I mean, I can't speak for the other practices, but I can say that I think if you do it smartly, this is the time to invest in a different strategy for your workflow. It's a different time to look at delivery systems. I think we underutilize our technicians, but we also can't get them. So how can we change how what we're doing with them, is going to help our practice? So yeah, it's
Can I jump in that one for a second?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you said something very important there in regards to technologists is we have a shortage of them, and yet we're underutilizing them. What does that look like in your practice in particular? And what kind of steps have you taken to try and ameliorate that situation?
Hey, sorry, guys, I'm going to jump in. Let's can this one here and pick up right there next week. There's going to be a cliffhanger, I guess, for all of the listeners. 2-part episode with Enid. So check back in next week and we'll pick up right here talking about kind of workflow and efficiency and how COVID has kind of advanced that, and then dive into her role in the CVMA and council.
Perfect.
Thank you for listening to the Veterinary Project Podcast. As a recap, on behalf of our hosts, the Veterinary Project Podcast will be releasing new episodes weekly. So be sure to tune in as we bring you more conversations aimed at helping you enjoy a life well lived. If you enjoyed what you heard on the show and you want to stay in the know, please like, love, and or subscribe to the podcast on the listening platform of your choosing, as we're available on all the usual suspects. If you know of others that may benefit from these conversations, we'd love it if you please share the show with them, as this will help us grow our community to reach more and more veterinary professionals. Speaking of which, if you are a veterinary professional and would like to get connected with more like-minded individuals who are joining us on this journey, please send an email to the veterinaryprojectpodcast@gmail.com, and we'll invite you to be a part of our private Facebook group. General feedback, requests for information, or perhaps requests to be a guest on the show can also be sent to the veterinaryprojectpodcast@gmail.com. Dr. Michael Bugg and Dr. Jonathan Light, thank you for listening to the show, and we'll catch you again next week for another episode of the Veterinary Project Podcast. Bye for now.